Greetings everyone and welcome back to the Austin Lindsay channel. I wanted to talk about light modifiers and mainly kind of the top 3-ish light modifiers you're likely to encounter as a beginner photographer or videographer. I'm going to actually use this video light here to demonstrate light modifiers because it's easier to see on video than a strobe. But what I'm talking about applies to both photo and video. Sometimes the modifier mounts are a little bit different. If there's anything different, then I'll explain it as I go along. But basically you have your two parts. So this is not one thing, it's your light and then your modifier. So this is your light. You can also use, again, your studio lights or whatnot is one thing, and then your modifier goes over the top or around the top in front of the light, and it modifies the light in some way. Generally, the first modifier you'll come across is a reflector. Most or a lot of lights will come with a reflector of some kind. This SL60W came with this reflector here. The Godox 8400, 600, a lot of the Godox line comes with some sort of reflector. It actually, I don't know where the cap is for it, but you can put a cap over this and it becomes, you know, a protective unit as well. And you could pull this off. This one is kind of a non-conventional reflector. It's a little bit smaller. The one I just put on there, you can put on here via a Bowens mount, and we'll get into mounts in just a little bit later. But you have a reflector here. AlienBees, I believe, still comes with their reflectors. Profoto does not. Shocking, I know. So that's going to be your first modifier you'll probably come across as a beginner photographer or videographer. So reflectors are a hard light source, and obviously I'm not going to get too much into it in this video, but your light source or your modifier is hard or soft in relation to whatever you're shooting. So if I'm shooting a person or a portrait, this is a small light source in relation. So this is smaller than my body, so it's a small light source. A large octabox or something like that is larger than my body, so it's a soft light source. If I were shooting a piece of jewelry or something, a watch, then obviously this is going to be large and compared to that. A reflector is a hard light source generally, so it would give you kind of that hard light source similar to like maybe what the sun would give off. So with reflectors nowadays, there's actually a lot of different surfaces that you can get on the inside. So this one is more diffuse on the inside. So this will still give you kind of a nice ball of light, a circle of light directly in front of your light. But the edges, it'll kind of feather off a little bit nicer. Whereas these ones have a mirrored interior, and this one has a more mirrors or a more diffuse mirrored interior. This one has less mirrors. So this one will be a little bit more diffuse around the edges than this one. This one, for instance, will be a really bright ball of light in the center and a little bit harder fall off on the side. So I'll use reflectors sometimes when I want to get the most light output I can, or just use all the light I can from the light. I'll put on something like this where it just focuses it, and I want to shine it on maybe something smaller, or just want to use all the light I can get out of the light. I'll use a reflector like this. You can also use grids with most modifiers, and what grids do or are is a lot of them are like a honeycomb shape, for instance this one, and what they do is they focus the light and then they control the spill. So certain reflectors can take them, not all of them. If you'll notice, this one has a lip or a ridge around the side, whereas this one does not. What you can do is just slide this reflector here, and it kind of stays in by friction. And a lot of them have these little tabs right here, and you can just pull on the tab and take them out. So, and even with grids, you have some modification there. For instance, this is a 60-degree grid, so I don't know if you can see my face, but it lets more of my face shine through versus a 30-degree grid here, where I can actually just show you on this thing. So if I have this light, let's point it a little bit off to an angle. So with this one, you'll notice some of that spill has tidied up a little bit, and that's the 60-degree grid. if I put on the 30-degree grid. So if I tilt it to the side here, you'll get less spill off in your direction versus bare, and you'll get some spill off, but a little bit less if I put on this 60-degree grid. So you can use grids. I mean, I personally use them for maybe 2 reasons. If you have another reason that you know of, let me know. Sometimes the reasons can coincide, sometimes they're totally opposite. So sometimes I'll use a grid when I want a really small spotlight. And then sometimes I'll use a grid where, let's say I don't care so much about the spotlight, but I just want to control some of the light flying around the room. I'll use a grid for that reason. So you can use it to create a look via a spotlight or a circle, or you can use a grid to just control the spill. All right, so uses for a reflector. I use them for when I want to get the most light output, because generally they just take all of your light and focus it forward in a small compact area, so you get a really bright output in an area. So I'll use it when I really want to get the most amount of photons in an area that I can get. And then I'll use it if I want a hard light source. Let's say I'm outside and I want that high fashion look. I'll use this to kind of, number one, compete with the sun. Like I said, it gives you a lot of power and it gives you that hard edge, so it doesn't look like you've lit somebody outside. It looks like you're just outside naturally, so that'll give you that kind of look. And then sometimes I'll use it if I want to just light up a small area, let's say an area on a piece of clothing, or if I'm shooting product photography, a small item, or if I want to light up a background. Reflectors are really nice for making a ball of light and allowing it to just kind of gradient out on a background. So the second light modifier you're most likely to come across is an umbrella, and that's because they're fairly inexpensive and they're found all over the place. Umbrellas are used 2 main ways, and you have your shoot through, which is where you shine the light through them, and then the reflector type, which is where you reflect it back onto your subject, which is kind of confusing sometimes when you're starting out and you learn that this is a reflector, and then you can use an umbrella in a reflection style. I don't know why it's named that way or how the terminology came about, but that's just how I've learned. So with umbrellas, you can actually use them with some of them. Some reflectors will have a hole punched out of it. I don't know if you notice on the bottom here, there is a slot for an umbrella, and some reflectors will have a hole punched out because you can actually use a reflector with an umbrella to change your look or to modify your light a little bit further. How you would use this here is you would slide your umbrella into the slot, and then you would point your light away from the subject. If I was lighting myself, you'd point your light away from the subject, and then you'd have the light go into the umbrella, reflect back out, and fall onto your subject. So umbrellas are really good if you're traveling, if you're just want some really soft light. So with traveling, it's kind of a double-edged sword because they're not as durable as a modifier, but they are really inexpensive. So if you beat one up or damage one, you can get one pretty inexpensive. They also have different interiors. This one is a little bit, well, this one's a double-sided one. I don't know if you can tell. Let me turn this light off here. This one's a double-sided one. So on the interior here, it's mostly whitish with a little bit of sheen to it. On this other side, yeah, it's a little bit more tin-foily or reflection-y. I have this flipped over to this side because I'm not a huge fan of the tinfoil side of a reflection surface because it's a little bit too contrasty and too harsh for me. If I'm going to use a reflector like this, I want it to be pretty soft, but it's nice that they do make double-sided so you can use either side if you want. So with umbrellas, they are nice. They provide a really nice soft light. They're good for lighting groups of people because, again, the light just spreads all around. It's pretty soft. It's pretty nice. One of the downsides of using an umbrella as your only modifier, if you don't have anything else, is it's a little bit harder to control the light because it just flies around. Some things you can do is you can choke down on the umbrella, and you can light up just the inside or just the center. And then if you don't want it flying around the room, sometimes the edges here will help control the spill so you don't get any flying off towards you. You can also, I've seen people like close down the tines or whatever it is, something like this, and use an umbrella that way for a little bit harder light source, more control or whatever. I haven't used it like this a lot, so I can't really comment on the quality or the style of imagery you get out of it. But if you do use it like this, let me know what you think. If you want to post any pictures somewhere or send links, that'd be cool. Then you have your shoot-through umbrella. This one's a tiny little guy. And what you'll do on this one is you will turn your modifier and point it at your subject, such as this. You can also reflect back your shoot-through umbrella. Let's say you want less light for some reason. You've turned your power all the way down and you want just a little bit less light. You can do that in those situations because a lot of your light will go out the front of the umbrella. You'll get a little bit less coming back. So you can do it that way to control light, but generally your shoot-through umbrella, you're going to use this to shoot through. And then this one's really good because it creates this nice kind of hemispherical light source. It's nice because it'll spread in almost a 180 degree pattern. So some people use it for large groups, or it's just great for lighting a space with one light because it just fires light all around. That being said, it is probably the most difficult light modifier to control. They do make, I think it's called a Brawley box, which is basically a shoot-through umbrella with a piece of fabric on the back, which might have a somewhat reflective surface to reflect off the back. It's a little bit more controllable because you don't get as much light spill directly behind the light if you don't want it there. But generally, shoot-through umbrellas are the hardest modifiers to control the light on. To kind of reiterate, umbrellas are a great travel modifier because they're lightweight and inexpensive, and they're a great soft modifier, and they're really good for groups and for lighting large spaces. Okay, the third light modifier you're likely to come across in your journey would be some sort of softbox. Softboxes are just all sorts of crazy shapes and sizes. So you can have square, round. These ones are, this is a more shallower one. You have deep octoboxes or more parabolic shape. You also have even strip boxes, which are, longer one dimension than they are the other dimension for lighting thinner areas. So softboxes are there's a huge variety of softboxes when learning photography, but I'll kind of break it down to mainly square and circle. So with your square softbox, these are good for producing linear gradients. So if you're doing product photography, I know a good majority of product photographers will use square softboxes a lot of the time. You can shine it through a diffuser or shine it directly onto a subject or an item, and you can get a pretty cool look. You can get, some cool lines across maybe a bottle or a phone screen or something. You can get nice linear gradients and edges. It really defines edges. So square softboxes are really good for product photography. For portraits, they're really good as well, I think. They're great for if you're lighting a backdrop. Again, you can put it on one side if you want to create a nice gradient going across a wall or a backdrop of some kind. I even use them a lot of times to light people. There are some people that like a round softbox a lot more because you get a round catch light in the eye. They like that it mimics the sun. I don't mind either. I feel like a square softbox is the same as sitting next to a window in a house or something like that. So square or round is fine to me. Sometimes I will pick a modifier, square or round, depending on how I want the catch lights to look, just for that extra little bit of, artistic flair. If they're indoors and it's maybe a Victorian setting, I'll use a square softbox, so it does look like they're sitting by a window. But if I go outside, I will probably shoot with a round softbox because I like that it looks like the sun and we're outdoors. So softboxes are very common because you get a whole lot of control out of a softbox. So first off, you have all the light going out in one direction, because with a softbox you have the back is covered and then you have a reflective interior on the inside, and that's going to be focusing out your light in one direction. So you get a lot of light control that way. It's not going to be flying back and around the room. Then you have diffusion on the inside. You have two layers of diffusion on most soft boxes. You have an inner baffle and then you have an outer baffle. So you can take one off, the inner or the outer, and use one or the other depending on the look that you want with your video or your photo. And then you can grid them. So a lot of them have like a edge around with Velcro or something that you can put a grid on, and then you can control the light even more. So out of the three modifiers we've talked about today, they provide the most amount of control. Okay, I think to wrap things up, I'll talk about modifier mounts. So modifier mounts also have two parts. You have your modifier, like your mount, and then you have your speed ring. And then your mount goes in your speed ring like this one has. So you mount this inside here, and then the mount often can spin around within the speed ring. And the speed ring has holes around where you can mount your rod into. So this is common with the rod style modifiers. With the easy up style, the speed ring is often built in because the rods are permanently attached to the speed ring. In some cases, in a lot of cases that I've found, there'll be bolts around the side here where you can actually unbolt, and then you can remove your modifier mount and then put on a new modifier mount in there and change it out that way. Let's say if you have an easy up that either the modifier breaks or you want to change it out for a different brand, sometimes you can do that. So the one thing you want to note is there's different diameters, because there's actually a few different speed rings. So this is a speed ring, this is a speed ring, this one's a speed ring here. This has a Profoto mount in the speed ring. So you want to make sure you'll get the right diameter. You'll have to measure this across and get the right diameter speed ring, because this one's a Bowens, this one's an AlienBees. They're a little bit different sizes, so you want to make sure you got the right size. So, and in talking about mounts and speed rings, some companies will do their own mounts. With AlienBees, they have their own type of mount where they have kind of a reverse grip where it grips outward onto this rim here. So for AlienBees, you'll need their own type of modifiers unless you decide to change it out. With Profoto, this is a Profoto mount in a generic speed ring. Profoto, I can actually show you. So the Profoto one, you'll slide onto the end of the barrel, and there's a big rubber piece, and it really kind of just holds on by a grip and friction. And then you have, if you can see this here, you have markings here. So if you like the modifier set at a number 4 where it's kind of poking out, or if you want it all the way in to a number 8, you can remember your settings on this. So my favorite mount is Bowens mount. I feel like it's the most secure. It's very ubiquitous. So if you're starting out and you don't have a loyalty to, let's say, AlienBees or Profoto, or you weren't given some for some reason, I would go with a brand that has Bowens mount, because it's a lot easier to find modifiers for them. So I think it's much more secure. It's the bayonet style. So there's 3 locking kind of nubs on the side here. What they do is there's 3 on the side here. You put it on and twist. You can't really see it, but it locks it on. So it's not going to rotate out. You can put weight on it and it's not going to slide off the end of it. You're locked on until you use the lock button here. All Bowens mount lights and stuff have some sort of locking pin, and then you rotate it and then you can take off your modifier. So if you can get Bowens mount, it's a lot easier in the long run, in my opinion. All right, you guys, that was a little walkthrough of kind of the 3 most common light modifiers you're likely to come across as a beginner photographer. If you guys do have any questions, leave them in the comments field. I'll do my best to answer them. And thanks everyone for watching.